There's been a 40% increase in the prison population since 1994. By March this year, there were over 160,000 prisoners, but just under 120,000 beds. How then can anyone on the inside be rehabilitated? Let's get started. Good evening and welcome to the Democracy Gauge. I'm Bongani Bingwa. In assessing 25 years of democracy tonight, we focus on our prison system. There's no other way to put it. Our inmates live like canned sardines. Some cells house 2 or 3 times the number of inmates they were designed to hold. And those are the guilty ones. There are 8,000 people in prison simply because they can't afford bail. They're still waiting to have their cases tried. The choked court rolls also lead to delays and overcrowding. So then, on our poll question tonight, do our prisons need to reform in the way that they handle inmates? You can choose from the 3 colors that we have as a standard. Green is for yes, yellow is for maybe, and of course red is for no. You can interact with our poll topic on Facebook and Twitter. Remember to use the hashtags SABCDG25 and hashtag SABC News. You can also send us your WhatsApp videos to 065 862 4548. Now, the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services has lamented the high rate of suicide plaguing South Africa's correctional facilities. Our producer, Lindiwe Mabena, spoke to a former inmate for a first-hand account on the quality of life on the inside.
Umama ngimkhulumisa amanga amaningi yabo ngumenzise izinto eziningi ukuthi into enginokuyisho ke ukuthi uthando alifani khona uthando lumoshayo.
Jekin Tlapo is one of the thousands of South Africans who's lived inside a prison and says it was a horrific life. His life of crime started in grade 8. Tlapo grew up in Soweto's Zola section, where he witnessed the attractive type of lifestyle some criminals lived.
Most into eba isithombe esikhulu, the bigger picture ezola mawukhula crime, and the way ingakhona kuze kube ngazathi ayikusinte wrong. Uyabo kushuthi uba isikhokhonyana.
From stealing copper cables, he went on to specialize in housebreaking, but soon the law caught up with him and he spent most of his young life in prison.
Yabo manje ukugcina njoba ngiboshwe bengina 24 ngabhalisa ukuthi ngina 16. Yabo i-birth certificate yami yashintshwa yaze yamosheka bese ineyimbobo ngoba mele icishwe ibhalwe kabusha. Yabo mangiboshwa mhlambe manje ngusibusiso Dube, next week nguJekin Tlapo, next week ngubongani Maduna.
He cites Boksburg and Stoffberg correctional facilities as amongst the most dangerous prisons in the country.
Amajele awafani la eSun City vele kusemasofeni ukuzwile ngithe kuse crash la eBoksburg akusukuse crash. eBoksburg into yokuqala igangsterism iningi, ijele ukuthi sibheme insango phambi kwamaphoyisa. Yabo iphoyisa amalambile singena nalo eselini siyalifrayishela kuplonyiwe kuyathengiswa nje. Uyabona kuselokushini kuyaphithizela enhle nje. Uyabo nokuthi inhleli nje sebayagwazana abantu nje ilezo iphithiphithi lezo.
Tlapo says inmates join gangs for protection and survival. Those who are not part of gangs become vulnerable, and the victims are often reluctant to complain for fear of greater danger.
Ejele ziyabuya kusebenze khona lento abathi simokolo. Yikho ngithe kungafa ejele ungafa because of imali. Yabo khona amaphoyisa ekuwukuthi akumelanga asebenze akusiphoyisa utsotsi.
His life changed after he was incarcerated at Boksburg Correctional Center in 2005. He was serving a 6-year jail term for housebreaking. During the 13 months spent there, Tlapo says life was so unbearable that he swore never to return, a promise he has kept.
Ngiphume 2010 ejele. Manje na 2019 na 9 years ngila ngaphandla ngitshontsha ngenze angibhema ngiphuza into mangifuna ngiyayithenga. khona amajele ukuthi mawufuna kube nokuthula igadamele zibe khona khona amajele ukuthi amaphoyisa yabo like ngi-head of prison or ngi-head of section angilo ngisesha la ngiseshana nabafowethu kumele ngibayeke babhandini kuzoba right kuyohlala kuthulile nje
permanently ka
iyazishe khamba into yabantu ama-gents ankawuzi.
Dapo is now an evangelist and part of an NGO that helps recovering drug addicts. He also visits schools to warn young people about the dangers of drugs, a journey that he says lands one behind bars. I'm Lindy Omabena for SABC News in Johannesburg.
Thank you, our Lindiwe Mabena, for that report. Joining now the conversation is our Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Mlamola. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, we could talk more broadly about the challenges that face our prison system, but I have to just ask you, what's your reaction to the insert you've just heard and what reportedly happens inside our prisons?
Yeah, evening to you and to the viewers at home. It is a concern for us, the current state of our correctional facilities. But we believe that we've come a very long way from, you will remember, our prisons prior or our correctional facilities prior to 1994. They were aimed to warehouse people just for the sake of them being hidden far away. There was no rehabilitation program, and it was not aimed for people to be rehabilitated for social integration. So we have transformed this in terms of the laws, but also in terms of the infrastructure. We're beginning to transform our correctional facilities to facilities that will enable rehabilitation, to facilities that will respond to the needs that when inmates leave our correctional facilities, they can make a contribution in society economically or a positive one. Hence, we have now giving them skills in the cells. We are also giving them various skills that will not only help them in terms of looking for employment, but also to be self-employed.
Sure. But I have to ask, I mean, it may be the stated aim of the correctional system to try and do all the noble things you've just described, but problems like overcrowding, for example, I mean, you heard in my intro, 40% more prisoners in our prisons since 1994. You've got 73% of inmates, who have a bed, 27% do not. Those kinds of conditions within prisons make it very difficult to achieve the aims you've just outlined.
Our overcrowding is 37% and across the country, which is a serious challenge, which we are saying.
So it's even worse than my figures, right?
It's 37%. Your figures is 40 and 73. But the reality is that there is overcrowding, which we are accepting, which we have to address, all of us as a nation. You can only deal with overcrowding on various aspects. Firstly is that we need to deal with the triple challenges of poverty in society. The crime rate, which is high, people being incarcerated coming into our cells. When we have them in the justice system, we also have to look at the Criminal Procedure Act, which was drafted in 1977 with various amendments. And the aim of the act was just to send everyone into prison. So we are in the process of modernizing the act so that there can be non-custodial sentencing in some of the aspects like petty crimes, which do not really need you to go into a cell to be rehabilitated, for you to give a second chance to that person. With regard to infrastructure, it's a very long-term, infrastructure is a long-term project, but we've done our best. We've opened a few prisons in the last financial year, Escort in KwaZulu-Natal, Standerton in Mpumalanga. We have just going to finalize Kgoshi in Pretoria, and a new correctional facility in Tzaneen in terms of revamping. So there is an infrastructure plan, but obviously infrastructure cannot match the level of incarceration. So those are the challenges we grapple with on a day-to-day basis.
You talk about poverty. Is there a plan, for example, to assist people whose only crime is really not being able to afford bail, where you can obviously tell that maybe they're not going to be a flight risk, they're not going to be presenting a danger to society, but the idea that simply because they are poor, they're going to languish in jail until they go to trial. Will you look at that as well?
Yes, we are going to look at that, and that's why I'm saying we're looking at the issue of the Criminal Procedure Act, because it doesn't have that flexibility. If the court has given you a particular amount, there's nothing that we can do. So we have to see how we make sure that we amend the act to enable us, or for it to be compatible with the current constitutional democracy and the societies and the realities that we're living in of high level of inequality and poverty. in our country. So the issue of bail should still enable us to find a creative way of resolving it, while we still ensure that inmates, they're able to come back to court, because there's also a reality that some of them, if you just do not give them some kind of conditions, they may never come back.
But there's also the reality that for many people, they become even more hardened once they've been incarcerated for a period. Would you say that's fair?
It's not many. It does happen, isolated incidents, but from our reports and some of the things we have seen is that there are a lot of rehabilitative programs that we have. People who have came out of prisons with matric, who did not have, people who have come out with skills which they did not have previously. Some of them are employing people today, more than 16, some are employing 3 people. They are making a contribution into the economy. Okay. So there is a positive outcome from some of the inmates. And then I think even yourselves, you work with some of the guys who have come from our correctional facilities.
Right, we'll look at the issue of gangsterism, we'll look at the issue of corrupt prison officials or correctional services authorities that are part of the system that makes it difficult for inmates to be rehabilitated. We'll continue our conversation. Now, after the break, we'll also, of course, gauge your views on whether you think our prisons can or, in fact, do reform inmates. Stay tuned.
We have then a challenge that future public protectors, including myself, when I am doing my work, then there is that element of fear.
South African public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane constantly making headlines with her work. We chat to the president of the African Ombudsman and Mediators Association, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, on African Perspective this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central African Time.
Welcome back. It's all about you here on the Democracy Gauge. Now, the People's View allows you to interact with us and to share your views candidly. Let's find out what some of you have had to say via WhatsApp videos.
The problem concerning the prison system is that our brothers and sisters who are the prison warders, they are busy feeding these prisoners with dangerous weapons like knives, giving them drugs. Some of them, they give them weed. At the end of the day, they kill each other in the cells. So we want to send a strong message to the prison warders to stop what they are doing to our brothers and sisters who are prisoners. Thanks very much. God bless them.
All right, we continue the conversation with Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola. I mean, you've seen that WhatsApp video we got. The issue of corrupt officials within the correctional services system, that surely does a lot of the good work you are trying to do. It undoes a lot of the good work you're trying to do.
Yes, it does. And it is an isolated incident. All the officials that have been found to be corrupt, we have dealt with them. We have got a list of officials that we have dealt with them in the past financial year. And as I speak to you, we have also suspended many officials in the correctional services who are currently undergoing disciplinary hearings on the basis of the issues of collusion,
have you got a
smuggling of contraband. I think the figure can be given to you. I don't have the exact number, but it's about 40 or something, but we do have it.
I ask you because you're saying these are isolated incidents, but quite often we hear of inmates who've been able to even have cell phones smuggled into cells. People have had internet access within the prisons. And so all these kinds of exposés and stories come out fairly frequently. What are the consequences for corrupt officials who are involved in criminality within the system?
As I've said, it's dismissal, it's a suspension. Where there is proof, we deal with them in terms of our procedures internal. And I'm saying this because I visited most of the correctional facilities. And I've seen the good work that inmates are doing and also the officers. The bad thing that becomes viral when something happens, for example, what happened at the Westville in Durban, I think another one in the St. Albans in the Eastern Capes, Goedemund in Bloemfontein. So those things, when they do happen, they catch headlines, they become stories for the whole week. So we have to ensure that those few rotten potatoes do not tarnish the entire system. And it's for that reason that we are driving a process that shows and showcase what is happening with our inmates and with our correctional facility without hiding anything.
Yeah. There is also the pressure for inmates to be part of gangsterism. In fact, many people who might be imprisoned for crimes they committed on their own are forced, because of the nature of how things work inside, to join gangs for protection, and it becomes complicated and difficult for inmates to be able to break out of that system. What are you doing to eradicate gangs in prisons?
Obviously, that one, we need indeed a working relationship also with the communities, because most of the gangs, we find that they are formed outside the correctional facility. When they get arrested inside the facility, they continue with that. It's an extension of that gangsterism life. And it is in some of our facilities where mostly gangsterism is rife, like here in Johannesburg, in the Western Cape, in some parts of Durban, and maybe some parts of Boksburg, and some areas, and so forth. So we have got a strategy to dismantle and deal with this. But we need the help of communities, because without communities, our correctional facilities will not be able to help in terms of gangsterism, but also in terms of reintegration of some of the inmates who are in our facilities.
What's your response to the earlier insert we had from our producer, Lindwa Mabena, who the inmate says that, you know, even if you report some of what's going on within the prisons, you don't quite know who is on the take from some of the gangs. It would appear that in some setups, there's not much difference between those who are meant to be supervising the facility and those on the inside. And of course, the fear of reprisals for any people who report what might be going on.
It is for that reason that almost at the end of this month or September, we are going to launch a call center where members of families of inmates can be able to call the call center for any complaint of a matter that might not have been handled in a procedural way. We think that will enable us to pick up some of the issues that are being raised, and that will give us a general understanding of the situations across the country. And from time to time, we will then be able to intervene as and when a complaint is raised. So, because that will create a situation of fairness and also of people reporting without fear of any retribution.
To some fanfare last year, there was a launch of the Nelson Mandela rules for the treatment of prisoners. Has that made a difference in terms of the experience of inmates on the inside?
Yes, it is beginning to, and we have now started the process of operationalizing the manual. The officers are being trained on how to implement the Nelson Mandela rules, because this is an international standard of how inmates must be treated and how they must live their life in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of reintegration, and the various aspects that relates to their hygiene. And I think it is going to have a far-reaching implication and a positive impact on our correctional facilities.
Minister, just wanted to take a look just behind you. We've got a question from one of our viewers who sent it in saying, "Hi Minister, Matluleng from Cape Town. Are you at some point going to deport back foreign prisoners as they're costing the state the money it doesn't have?" The issue of foreign nationals rearing its head as far as this issue is concerned as well. What's your response to that question?
Obviously that it has to be dealt with in terms of our constitution, in terms of international protocol of transferring of foreign inmates. We are beginning discussions with various countries, starting with SADC in terms of bilateral agreements. But also there is a discussion at the SADC level. I'm not sure if it has been signed today at Dar es Salaam. That is going to help us with the protocol of transfer of inmates. But it's not as easy where you just wake up and say you are transferring you because you come from a particular country. You still have to respect the constitutional right of that person as enshrined in the Nelson Mandela rules and the international treaties and obligations that we have. That prisoners need to consent, they need to give you permission. All those things have to be taken into consideration as you deal with this matter.
So I'm going to ask you then the question we've been asking our viewers this evening. Can our prison system? Can our correctional facilities rehabilitate inmates? You've got three colors, like our viewers have to choose from.
Yeah.
Green is for yes, yellow is maybe, and I suspect you won't pick red, but I'll tell you, you have the option. No is, of course, the red color. So what do you pick?
Obviously. I'm very optimistic that it can be done.
You're optimistic that it can be done, and I suppose our final question is, there's still a perception from many members of society that in fact prisons are also, along with rehabilitation, but primarily a place of punishment.
No, it's a place of corrections, and that's why we have amended the Correctional Services Act to deal with that part of corrections. We also expect there will not be solutions for inmates, particularly those that have got criminal records, which is the biggest challenge for them when they are released from our facilities. Communities also have to accept people that have demonstrated a rehabilitative attitude so that they are able to participate in jobs, in the economy, because there's nothing that stops a person who has got a criminal record to be employed. We're dealing with issues of expungement of criminal records and so forth. But as we speak now, there's no law that a person who comes from our correctional centers cannot be employed. But employers use this to say, we cannot employ you, you cannot be reintegrated. And that then leads to recidivism for the inmates. They end up going back because they have no option of doing any other life. So communities will have also to help us, because it's important that when they leave our facilities, they get the reception. And also it will help them with their positive attitude to say, indeed, I can change my life.
All right, Minister, thank you very much for your time and for popping into the Democracy Gauge this evening.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll meet 114-year-old Jan Steenberg from Colchester in the Eastern Cape. Stay with us.
The ANC-NEC revealed in a statement that they supported the user pay system.
So are you saying that motorists, Gauteng motorists, have to pay for e-tolls?
It is a principle that is raised. We are saying that we support the principle of user pay.
We imported a lot of technology, as an example, in order to invest here, and those people are not going to say, listen, you don't have to pay me back. They are demanding their money back.
SANRAL has another 19,000 kilometers of non-tolled roads which it finances the maintenance, the upgrading, the building of. Why they want to continuously force a square peg into a round hole on this issue just blows us away.
It makes no sense to pay a toll on a toll on a toll. The roads are still looking terrible. The whole thing is just ridiculous.
It needs to be scrapped.
We didn't ask for it. So why do we have to pay for it?
Welcome back. Now, through the Democracy Gauge, SABC News profiles a different South African. We've been going around the country, getting people's assessment of the last 25 years of democracy. And today we're in the Eastern Cape. We're in Colchester today, and we're meeting 114-year-old Jan Steenberg. He says in his lifetime he's seen different government administrations come and go and making promises, but do they keep them?
Bij de regering had ik iets gekregen, maar ik kreeg altijd, als het zo goed was, dan kreeg ik altijd kostbaar. Hadden we iets hier voor de mensen, zo en beheersen en nee. Nou, die laatste was het man geweest. Laten we nou, stel die eisen, recht maken iets van mij. Want het komt nog niet zo ver niet. Ik voel niet te veel net wat dit was. Ja, die eisen gaan zeggen dan doe. Hulle bly nie op hulle woorde nie. Nou ek wag vir daai woord van hulle kom nie so ver die woord wegwerk. Hy nog nie ons verander soos ons het wel hê. Hulle doen nie, dit soos ek weer sê. Hulle sê dan kom nie so ver die ding doen nie. Ek kan wou jy weer. Ek wil jy weer, het gaan miskien weer wou, ek weet nie wie wou ons daar nie, maar daar is nie iets. Maar ons krijg niet van die woud niet. Alle woud gedaan. Kijk, als ik mijn kinderen kan niet werken. Alle woud, dan kiezen die mensen. Kijk, hier is alle werk. Zolang ze kan mijn kinderen voor werken. Zoals zo woud rijden, dan zijn er zwart mensen. wat werk kry, maar my kinders kan nie kry. Daarbij is het iemand nou losgemaakt. Dat ons moet samenleven. Ons moet niet onder elkaar. Dus vark en katten is niet. Ons leven nou samen. Daarbij zeg ik dank je voor die jaren. En man, enkel wat nog moet gebeuren, moet net die dingen doen. Voor ons armen. Doe die dingen voor ons, dat ons ook kunnen lekker leven en ook kunnen lekker zitten. Dan onze eigen recht maken. Dan gaan alles lekker is en alles recht. Ik wil vrede niet van die land. Als we vrede lief. Je moet niet aan je slecht, je moet niet skunnen niet. Je moet niet slecht praten aan de je niet. Praat ieder goed van een mens. Dat is wat je om slecht. Je moet niet oordelen. Wat was Jan? Ik heb die geelwoordje gekiest voor die land. Dat moet recht komen nog. We hadden het nog niet weggemaakt.
So maybe from a man who's seen it all. Now, before we say goodbye, let's take a look at the results for today's poll. There they are on your screen. The vast majority of you not going with what the minister said in terms of how you see it. As always, we thank you for watching. From me, Bongani Bingwa, and the Democracy Gauge team. Until the next time, Ubusuku Benzol. Good night.